Our speaker, Kam Knight, is an author, a coach, and a frequent speaker at lots of different organizations. The topic that he's going to be discussing is the enemy within. Now, you might think that this is a bit political, but it is how to win the battle against your inner resistance. Within ourselves, we all have the enemy. Uh, he is an international speaker. He's a best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental, emotional, and physical performance. He is known for bringing fresh solutions and insights that are a rare departure from traditional ideas. Because of his fresh perspective, his books have become the gold standard for their respective topics, which have helped over 500,000 people. When he's not coaching or writing, he's traveling, having traveled to over 100 countries around the world. Let's give a very warm welcome. It's nice to see you again, Kam Knight.
Hey, Kathy, how are you?
Excellent. Take it away.
All right, so I have a PowerPoint slide that I'm gonna share. Can I get access to?
Yes. And Kam,
Let's,
if people have questions, do you want them to put them in the chat or save them or unmute? What would you prefer?
yeah, it'll be helpful to put any questions in the chat or to hold on to them until the end, because I've got a pretty cool presentation that'll
All
help
right.
people understand why they get stuck and the different facets of that happening. So yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can share music notes. Hmm, okay, interesting. I did open up my PowerPoint. All right, just give me a quick sec here.
Of course.
In the meantime, I put a link to all of Cam's books in the website, in the chat, so you can, take your pick. Quite a
Yeah,
carousel, and then also, of course, to his LinkedIn profile, should you want to reach out and connect with him.
There
yeah.
we go.
All
We've
right,
got
great.
it now.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for Shannon to put my books in the chat. And
Good stalling
okay,
technique.
yeah. So you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So today's presentation is called The Enemy Within, Winning the Battle Against Your Inner Resistance. And this is going to be this is going to take you kind of on my journey of how I understood resistance and procrastination and sabotage. And it's much more complicated than you think. A lot of times when we sabotage or procrastinate, we think it's because we don't have what it takes and we're not good enough or we don't have discipline, but it's none of that. There's actually a lot of complex stuff going on. And it's going to be presented in a very story form because the brain learns through story. And it help not only understand what's going on for us internally, but remember it. So when you are in your day to day and you find yourself getting stuck, you'll kind of understand what's going on. And before I get started, I just want to confirm that you guys can hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to start by asking, do you struggle to get things done? You know what to do, you know how to do it, and you have the motivation, but for one reason or another, you can't or don't do it. Every time you have a great idea, you get so excited, but then days or weeks later, the excitement's gone and nothing's really done. And you're frustrated at yourself because none of what you're trying to do ever transpires. Why is that? Why is it when we want to do something, No matter how much we want to do it, we can't. Why is it so hard to do the work? This was the question I more or less set out to answer about 15 to 20 years ago. And in this presentation, you're going to uncover not only the secret to ending procrastinating and sabotage, but the inner workings of what's going on. And before I get started, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Kam Knight. I have written over a dozen books, traveled to over 100 countries, speak 4 languages, mastered 3 types of yoga, 2 styles of dance, and I've sold quite a bit of books. But it wasn't always this way. In fact, my life was the complete opposite. I came from a third world country, and when my family moved to the US, we lived just as poor. I grew up in a rundown house, and since my parents couldn't afford to pay the bills, it was freezing in the winter and scorching in the summers. One summer, the power went out in our neighborhood, and my older brother fell asleep with a candle on and burnt the entire upstairs. Since we didn't have any money to fix it, I lived in a burnt room for most of high school. Can you imagine living in a burnt house as a kid? It sucked. I wanted a way out, and I was told if I worked hard in school, I'd get a good job and live a good life. But unfortunately, the recession at the time, something that we're struggling with right now, made it difficult to find work. And after sending out over 200 resumes, speaking to dozens of recruiters, and interviewing with over 15 companies, I took the only job that made me an offer, making barely enough to cover rent. And since I couldn't afford my own place, I was back at my parents living in a dirty, moldy basement. And most of my life, I envy people who had things that I didn't. They lived in big homes, drove nice cars, wore designer clothes, and went on vacations that cost more than my dad's yearly salary. Unfortunately, I didn't have any of that. I had holes in my shoes, tears in my jacket, and I made toys out of cereal boxes. But I had big dreams. I remember watching the movie Titanic and was fascinated with Leonardo DiCaprio's character traveling the world. And in the Disney movie Up, the kids reminded me how much I wanted to travel to places like Roraima. In fact, I had all kinds of things on my bucket list. I wanted to write a book, see the 7 wonders of the world, learn a foreign language, see the Eiffel Tower, dive the Great Barrier Reef, ski the Swiss Alps, visit the Amazon rainforest, and climb Roraima from the movie Up. But above all, my childhood left me terrified of living poor, and I wanted to be successful, so I didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from ever again. But even more, I wanted to feel good about myself. Haven't you guys all seen a super successful person and felt like you weren't as good as they were? I wanted to feel like I was worthy of other people's respect. In fact, I wanted people to want to be me for a change. But it was a struggle. It's a clear blue Saturday morning, and I can see the sun shining through my bedroom window. I can hear as I'm walking to the bathroom, I can hear the birds chirping and the people laughing outside. Sounds like a great day to be out, but I promised myself I'd stay in and work on my first book. I sit down in front of the computer to begin writing, but as soon as I do, ideas for another book pop into my head, and then another one. They're distracting me so much I can't focus on the first book. As I'm thinking about the other books, last night's movie pops into my head, and I'm wondering if I should write a screenplay instead, or maybe go into acting. If that's not bad enough, my mind's throwing out ideas for possible business, and then another one. And now it's wondering how cool it'd be to learn the guitar. All of these desires are pulling me in every direction that I can't focus. As I bring my focus back to the first book, all of a sudden I have an urge to clean my bedroom. That's odd. Normally I have to force myself to clean, but right now I can't pull myself away from dusting and vacuuming. Finally, everything is done. I sit back down in front of the computer, and now I have to go to the bathroom. Weird. I just went to the bathroom and normally don't have to go back so soon. After the bathroom, I'm feeling hungry. It's not the time I normally eat, but I'm feeling lightheaded, so I fire up the grill and throw on a burger. Sure enough, the burger makes a blood rush to my stomach, so I decide to take a nap. And as soon as I wake up, I decide to call my sister to see how she's doing. And by the time we hang up, it's evening and the entire day has gone without me writing a single word. Sounds familiar, right? This was the pattern in my life. I'd get motivated to start something, but I wouldn't start. If I did start, I'd get distracted. If I didn't get distracted, I would stop before making progress. And if I managed to make progress, I sabotage myself before getting to the end. And I did this over and over for years and years. I was fascinated with why this kept happening. Why is it when I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it? At the time, there were no clear answers. A book I picked up, a book I picked up talked about the importance of setting a clear goal. So I wrote down a goal of writing my first book called Mind Tools. But as soon as I did, I became overwhelmed and didn't start. So I broke the goal into smaller, manageable steps, hoping that would make the goal easier. And the couple steps went great, but after the first couple, I forgot about the rest. So I set reminders all around the house, drawer, desk. Heck, I even changed the home screen on my phone so I always saw the reminders. And the reminders were great, but after the first few weeks, I began tuning them out. In fact, the reminders became a reminder of how behind I was falling. At that point, I got serious and I hired a coach. And he said, if you don't schedule it, you won't do it. So I set dates and times for all my activities, even the minor ones. And that too worked great in the beginning, but when anything came up, it threw my entire schedule off. Now I was desperate. I had heard the importance of making a public commitment and how it could really push a person to get serious about a goal. So I announced to everybody about my goal of writing a book. And just like before, I felt the push, but just like before, the push faded. It always faded. The reminder faded, the urgency faded, the motivation faded. The only things that never seemed to fade were my feelings of guilt, shame, and failure. Raise your hand or put in the comment if you resonate with that. And at that point, I had a startling realization that changed the course of my life and the reason you're listening to this or watching this presentation. I realized that desire does not lead to action. Just because I want to do something doesn't mean I'll take the necessary steps to do it. Motivation and discipline aren't enough. And I'm sure you know what I mean, right? Like you read an inspiring book, hear a motivational speech, or watch a life changing movie and get inspired to make a change. You could see an outcome, a new possibility, and know that this time's going to be different. But then a few days or weeks later, the excitement fades and you're back to where you started. Then you read another book, listen to another speech, or watch another life changing movie and get excited about making a change again, but the outcome is the same once more. And you've been doing this for years and decades, haven't you? I'm going to share something scary about this cycle later in this presentation, but I thought to myself, this isn't the life that I want to live. I don't want to go through this pattern of starting something only to stop and have nothing to show for it. I didn't want to go through this endless cycle of starting and stopping and starting and stopping again. So I decided I was going to figure this out. I had a mindset that I would try anything and everything. Whatever tips, techniques, systems, procedures, and processes came my way, I would try them. Anyone who followed my journey said, wow, Cam, you really leave no stone unturned. And in this presentation, you'll see just how far I went. I read books, I attended seminars, and I learned from some of the biggest names in personal development, like David Asprey, father of modern biohacking, Brendan Burchard, king of common practice, Hal Elrod, best-selling author of The Miracle Morning, Les Brown, legendary motivational speaker, Lisa Nichols, star of the movie The Secret, as well as Lee Steinberg, legendary sports agent that inspired the movie Jerry Maguire, and with clients such as Patrick Mahomes. But above all, I Went to the furthest reaches of the globe working with shamans, masters, and healers. And even more, I pushed myself to do unbelievable things. I pushed as hard and as far as I could go. And when I had nothing left, I pushed harder and farther. Like I said, I left no stone unturned, but you still haven't seen anything. At a certain point, I made my way to Romania. It's a chilly morning in the capital city of Bucharest, and I'm rushing to Unity Square, the meeting point of my city tour. I arrive just in time for the tour to start, and as soon as this does, our guide begins talking about to us about some of the famous leaders of the country, like Nicolae Ceausescu, the infamous dictator during communism. At a certain point in the tour, our guide brought up something about the dictator that set the stage for the life changing secret you're about to learn on procrastination and sabotage. And that was his home. You're probably thinking, how could someone's home be so life changing, right? Well, it was, and it's because it was unbelievably lavish. You can't imagine how much one person could live in indulgence. Marble stairs in the entrance, theater seating in the meeting room, golden tubs and faucets in the bathroom. If that wasn't enough, handmade mosaics by renowned artists. If that wasn't enough, private chapel to hold religious service. If that wasn't enough, each room decorated to the highest standard, and his home had over 80 rooms. Mind you, this was during communism when he forced his people to live in tiny apartments called matchboxes and gave them limited access to food and hot water. Hard to imagine the greed of one person when so many of his people were suffering. Unfortunately, his greed wasn't unique. The more I traveled, the more I saw this, whether visiting the Royal Palace in London, the Bahia Palace in Morocco, the Presidential Palace in Cambodia, one of Pablo Escobar's many mansions in Colombia, the Casino Royale in Monaco, castles throughout Europe, and even in ancient history. Like I said, I left no stone unturned, but you still haven't seen anything. After traveling to enough places, I began to see a standard story play out with us humans over and over, time and time again, no matter what part of the world I visited. It's the story of people's desire for more and more and more. You can't imagine how much one person can own. Rooms the size of houses, gardens as big as parks, driveways as long as streets, and the maids, cooks, and butlers to fill a town. And all of these experiences made me realize that the part of the brain that creates wants is completely unrestrained. It's creating wants one after another at a pace faster than anyone can achieve. You can think of this part of the brain, which I call the wanting mechanism, as a simple on-off switch that gets flipped based on certain cues. It sees a new pair of shoes and it wants it. The latest iPhone comes out and it wants that too. Someone attractive walks by and it wants that as well. This switch creates so many wants in a single day. No one person has the time, energy, and resources to achieve in a lifetime. Even if you live multiple lives, you couldn't achieve, let alone enjoy all the wants that your brain is producing. That's because your wanting mechanism doesn't understand that your time, energy, and resources are limited. It simply creates wants. It doesn't check to see if a want is achievable or fulfilling. It simply creates wants. Even while you are working on one want, this mechanism is creating other wants to chase. The wanting mechanism is the reason you buy stuff you don't need, crave things that aren't fulfilling, and also the reason why it's so difficult to stick with anything and do the work. And that's because your brain pulls you in so many directions, it's difficult to stay with any one. And I'm sure you know what I mean, right? Like you want to do this thing, but your brain nags you about something else. You start to something else, and your brain nags you about something different, doesn't it? You're pulled in all directions, north, south, east, west, but always standing still, never moving. And the only thing that seems to move is your energy draining. I realized if I wanted to accomplish anything in life, I had to get a handle on this mechanism. I can't chase every desire that it creates in the moment it creates them. In fact, no one can or ever has because a mechanism will keep creating more and more and more. So when we look at the people who had everything to be happy about, like Nicolae Ceausescu, as well as all the presidents and the palaces that I visited, no matter what they had, they always wanted more. And we might think it was because it was them, but it's really in all of us. And in fact, David Allen, author of the best-selling book Getting Things Done, said, "You can have anything you want, but not everything." And so what I would like people to do is I want this to be a little bit interactive, is I want everyone to pull out a sheet of paper and write down all the wants that you have. And there are certain wants that are going to be more at the forefront of your awareness, like you want to get a job, but just because you have that want and not able to think about the rest, there's actually tons of other wants that you have. And it actually can be impeding you in from getting this job or impeding you from moving forward in other areas. So let's all just take a moment and write down. And the wants can be everything. Like you could want a coffee, to watch a movie, to go see your kids or any of that. Just write as many as you can because it really helps to bring to your awareness all the wants that are percolating inside. I'm going to try to see if anyone, and if you guys want to throw some wants in the chat, that would be great as well. All right, so I'm just reading some of the comments. Story of my life mirrored back to me. I'm glad it resonates. I know that cycle all too well. Great. Yep. Cool. So, does anybody want to throw any wants in the chat? So, Matt says to serve. Can you be a little bit more specific, Matt? Okay. To read a book every month. Great. What about just the wants that you have for today? Maybe you want to go to the grocery store. Maybe you have a craving for lunch. Maybe you have um, that's great, berry to gain more muscle. Great. To finish one resume and submit it today. Perfect. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a lot of wants percolating. And because we're only in one body, play my guitar, Craig, thanks, we can't do everything. And because we can't do everything, all the other wants that we have can actually keep us from doing anything. The brain goes, well, if I do this, then I can't do that. And instead of keeping us from not doing something else, it'll keep us from doing that one thing that could really move the needle forward. So I'm glad that people are becoming aware of their wants because this is a really big piece of it. And so I'm going to continue and say, once I got a handle on my wanting mechanism, I finally had focus. I was no longer driven, pulled in every direction, or drawn to every distraction. It was like a huge weight fell off my shoulders because I had one thing I needed to do, and I didn't have any other distractions pulling me in every which way. But I was still stuck. I still couldn't do what I cut everything else out to do. Felt like Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Every action I took, it was as if there was an opposite force holding me back. I'm sure you guys have experienced that too, where you want to do something and the action's right in front of you, but you can't, as if some force is holding you back. And I couldn't help wonder what this force was. And I came to that answer in Cambodia. It's a Gray and gloomy afternoon, and I'm in the backseat of a rickshaw speeding down, and I'm on my way to Angkor Wat, the largest temple in the world. But before arriving, my driver makes a random stop, and from the corner of my eyes, I see a monkey looking for food. So I get out of the rickshaw to offer it a banana. At first, the monkey wouldn't come over to get it. And it wasn't as if it didn't want to come over, it was as if it couldn't. He could see the banana, see I was offering it, and wanted nothing more than to jump on that offer. But it couldn't, as if some force was holding it back. And I noticed this pattern with all other animals I encountered of all shapes and sizes from all around the world, whether a kangaroo or koala in Australia, a lion or elephant in Africa, seal or iguana in the Galapagos, sloths in Panama, bats in Rwanda, baboons in Ethiopia, ogres in Middle Earth, whether an eight-legged tarantula, thousand-legged millipede, or a zero-legged cobra, the response was always the same. If any of these animals wanted something, they were often held back as if some force was stopping them. Well, except the ogres, they were intent on eating me. And all of these experiences made me realize that there's something going on inside of us that has the ability to stop us. Something's going on inside that has amazing power to keep us from doing things no matter how much we want to do it. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well. Like you want to do this thing and the action is right in front of you. All you have to do is raise your hand, open your mouth, or take a step, but you can't, as if some force is stopping you. And that made me realize that there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that you hit anytime that you want to do something, but you can't, no matter how much you want to do it. So, given some of the examples in the chat of the things that you want to do, one person said that they want to send out a resume. Well, sure, we have a desire to send out the resume, but for one reason or another, we may not do it. Well, why is that? It's because there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. The same goes with some of the other desires people have said. And so the way this plays out is that one part of the brain creates wants, and it's creating endless wants one after another. And it doesn't check to see if a want is worth going after or pursuing. Its only job is to create wants. And in many ways, it's cranking out endless wants one after another at a pace faster than you can achieve. Then you have another part of the brain that checks and evaluates that want to see if it's worth pursuing and going after. And this is the part that decides or gives a green light if you should do it. And both of these forces drive your entire existence. The want is a push that inspires you to act, and resistance is a pull that holds you back. I'm sure you've seen images of the devil and saint on your shoulders in cartoons and movies, haven't you? Well, it's not necessarily a devil or saint per se. One's just a want, like I said, that inspiring you to act, and the other is resistance holding you back. You can think of the wanting mechanism like a kid in a candy store, and resistance like the parent that's trying to keep that kid in check. Makes sense, doesn't it? And the problem is, both can get in your way. The wanting mechanism can create so many wants that it makes it difficult to focus on and move towards any single one. And resistance can go so overboard, it doesn't care how much you want something, it'll hold you back from even that one want that you cut everything else out to do. So, for example, right now, many of you are looking for a job. And right now, your focus is on finding that job over everything else. And even though you have a singular focus on the job, resistance can still hold you back. And again, your entire life has been a battle between these two drives. Your entire existence has been a pull between these forces. This explains your behavior so much better, doesn't it? Like you want to do this thing, but resistance stops you. You want to do this other thing, but resistance stops you again. You've heard the phrase that you are your own worst enemy. Well, resistance is that enemy within you that stops you. So if you ever thought there was more to your procrastination than mere motivation, then you're right. If you thought there was more to sticking with a diet, staying with the routine, as well as moving forward with your goals and desires than just motivation and discipline, you're also right. The truth is, you have this hidden force that is designed to stop you, and it doesn't care how much motivation and discipline you have. If it doesn't give the green light, just like those animals, you can't act. But there is one more thing that makes this tug of war so challenging. And I learned about this in South Africa. It's a pleasantly warm Sunday afternoon, and my plane just landed in Durban, a city on the South African coast. I'm walking to the arrival gate, and I'm greeted by an older, slender man who takes my bags and puts them in the SUV of his car. As we're driving through the city, I'm looking at the backseat window, and I notice that it's full of danger, poverty, and above all, addiction. No wonder this man lives here. He runs a drug rehab clinic with an unusually high recovery rate, like 30 times higher than anywhere in the world, and it's the reason I'm here. At his clinic, I heard a woman give a speech about her journey of addiction. She described a pattern that addicts fall into that she herself fell into. She said many addicts know what they're doing is wrong. When they're searching for the next hit, a part of them knows that they should stop. Though, do you know what prevents them from stopping? It's a sneaky trick that keeps them perpetually stuck in their addiction forever. They say, after the next hit, I'll stop. After the next one, I'll stop. I just need to do it one more time, and after, I'll stop. And here's the thing, they keep saying it. After the next hit, I'll stop. After the next one, I'll stop. I just need to do it one more, but after, I'll stop. And when they say it, they're convinced after the next one, they'll stop. Absolutely convinced. In their mind, they truly believe that after the next one, they will stop. And this reminded me how much I do this myself. When it's time to stop playing video games, I'd say, after the next game, I'll stop. When it was time to stop scrolling through social media, I would tell myself, after the next post, I'll stop. When it was time to turn off Netflix, I would say, after the next show, I'll stop. And just like an addict, when I would say it, I was convinced I would stop, but I almost never did. And I realized this is how resistance shows up. When resistance stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us it's stopping us. It doesn't say, hey, Cam, you know that thing that you're trying to do? Well, it goes against our beliefs or our habit, so I can't let you do it. Nope, that's not what happens. Resistance uses manipulative tricks, and it has all sorts of tricks up its sleeves to keep us from doing things. In fact, do you remember my urge to clean the bedroom, go to the bathroom, and call my sister? Well, they were all tricks resistance was using to keep me from writing my book. And I'm sure you have experienced moments when you want to or need to do something, but you can't pull yourself away from something far less important. Well, it's these tricks at play. And know that your resistance is extremely sly. It has all sorts of tricks up its sleeve. And many of the tricks, you wouldn't think of them as tricks, which is why they work so well and why you so easily fall for them. So I'm going to quickly summarize everything you've learned. The first is desire doesn't lead to action. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean you'll take the necessary steps to do it. Motivation and discipline aren't enough. And you also learn why most tools and techniques work for only a short time. It's because once we're making progress, resistance kicks in and wants to stop us. It'll keep us from moving using those techniques. And then you learn that you have a part of the brain that creates wants, and it's completely unrestrained, creating wants one after another. And your wants, interestingly enough, can be the very thing that keeps you from going after them. And then when you do have a want, it gets evaluated by resistance using a host of criterias. And if resistance doesn't give the green light, you cannot act. And when resistance does stop you, it doesn't tell you that it's going to stop you. Instead, it uses manipulative tricks. And some of these tricks are very devious, which, like I said, you wouldn't think of as tricks, but that's why they work so well. And there's many challenges our wants create, and there's many causes of resistance, and there are many tricks up its sleeves. And so I want to talk about how once I got a handle on my wants, got at the root of my resistance, and became and exposed all the tricks, my success went through the roof. Anything I wanted to do, I did. If I wanted to learn something, I did that. If I wanted to go someplace, I did that too. If resistance threw roadblocks, I knew how to move around them. In fact, do you remember my bucket list? Well, I checked everything off. I saw the seven wonders of the world, visited the Eiffel Tower, scuba dove the Great Barrier Reef, skied the Swiss Alps, visited the Amazon rainforest, and even made it to Roraima and climbed to the top. Isn't that amazing? I didn't just write a book, but over a dozen. I didn't just visit all the countries on all the continents, but over 100 countries. I didn't just learn a foreign language, puedo hablar cuatro idiomas. And now I dance, rock climb, and do yoga, and I've become a best-selling author. So my question to you is, what are the wants that are holding you back from the ones that are going to move the needle forward? What is the wants filtering through that's going on internally you that's holding you back? But more importantly, how is resistance showing up in your life? What are some of the tricks that are coming up in play that is keeping you from doing the things that you want to do? So with that, now we can open up the floor to any questions anyone might have. And I will get rid of the sharing.
There is a question that Milan put in the chat. He said, "You have a great story. Thanks for sharing it, as it's very inspiring. My question is, based on all of this experience, how long did it take you to recognize this and break the cycle?"
It took me a long time. It was actually in Austin when I came to the realization of resistance. I, what I tell people is that for a long time, I was reading a lot of books, working with coaches, and attending a lot of seminars and doing my own personal work. And unknown to me, my brain was taking all that information and processing it. And at a certain point, I had this epiphany or aha moment. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And again, it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't no matter how much we want to do it. And I also became kind of really aware of the tricks through this process as well. But back then, I didn't know just how many tricks there were or how deceptive they get. Where now I'm at a point where anything that's keeping me from moving the needle forward or doing the thing that I want is a trick. So I would even go as far as to say getting sick or even getting into an accident is a trick, because when we get sick, we don't have any energy to do anything else, including the task, activity, or goal. And because we can't do that, we can't make progress, and the trick wins. The same thing when we get into an accident. It really takes a lot of our attention and focus away. And because our attention and focus has been taken away, we can't move forward in that area. And usually some of the more extreme tricks show up when we're actually making a lot of progress or we're about to get to the finish line and our brain is making a last ditch effort to really pull us away from the progress that we're making. And for example, if a person, let's just say in this group, everyone's looking for a job, they might be making good progress, getting a lot of leads, getting some interviews, and they're about to get an offer or they even get an offer. But resistance, for one reason or another, wants to put the brakes. It can do some really sly and devious things to keep us from getting over that hurdle or getting to that finish. So we continue to stay in our struggles and challenges.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Kim, I'm the one who asked that question. But you just mentioned something right now that I think really needs a little more explanation, and that is when you are in that scenario, like I was in one of those scenarios very recently, where I had a large vaccine manufacturer that I came very close to finalizing an agreement with them, and then they posed some sort of resistance from the very top person based on his thoughts that I would leave the company in 6 months for a larger role.
Yeah,
So how do you deal with that type of resistance? Because it wasn't my resistance. I was willing to take a step back on my role with the company, because it offered other intangibles that I could make up the difference on. But
yeah. So I teach internal resistance, so the resistance that's coming inside of us. And I think what you're referring to is a resistance that came from somebody else. But I suspect he picked up something going on internally in you. And whether or not you were going to leave the company or not, there's probably a part of you that felt like this isn't my role. I am scaling back myself. I deserve more. And that part could have come into play that made it challenging for you to get that. And the topic of resistance isn't something that is a simple thing to overcome because, like I said, the part of the brain that creates wants works separate from the part that allows us to act on that want. And if this part doesn't give the green light, we can't do it. And so, what's going on that it doesn't give us the green light? It's because it goes through a whole host of criteria to decide if we should do something or not. And some of the criteria are pretty commonly talked about in personal development, such as beliefs and habits and comfort zones. But it gets actually quite deeper than that. It goes into our self image and identity, authority issues, inner child, and things of that nature. So it's not always easy to pinpoint the cause of the resistance just in this one on one conversation. But I have developed a technique that helps people go into their unconscious to see what the resistance is and break those patterns. So if that's something you're interested in, we can do some of that work. Um,
There's one question is just chronological. What made you feel as though you should write a book? Was that the first thing that you were trying to do?
yeah,
And then there were two questions about how did you fund your travels?
yeah. So interestingly enough, I was in the corporate world and I used to actually be a CPA in my prior life. And I was doing well, but at a certain point, I had an itch to write. It was an overpowering itch I couldn't resist. Even though I wasn't a writer, I was an accountant, I was good in math and science, and I wasn't actually good at writing. In fact, I sucked at writing. I had no business writing a book,
What
though it
what
was
did
an
you want
over.
what did you want to write a book about?
The stuff that I wrote, that I have written about, so mental performance. I was really into the
Oh, okay.
mind back then.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me.
And it was an overpowering urge that I couldn't resist, so I followed it. And of course, I had a lot of resistance to writing because the way one of my tricks showed up was perfectionism. Because the resistance was I wasn't a writer, and I had a belief that people wouldn't like my writing. So my brain was stopping me from writing. And how it did that was I felt this need to make sure all my I's were dotted and T's were crossed to the point where I was spending over an hour to write a single paragraph. And I would write pages of text that I wouldn't even end up using. So all that time I was spending on perfecting was all that time I was using to not finish the book and put it out there. And hence, as you can imagine, the tricks of resistance were winning because it took me nearly 2 years to really write my first book. And as you had asked, what was it in? A lot of my books initially were in the area of mental performance. So my books are in speed reading, memory, concentration, mind mapping. And how did I fund my travels? Luckily, my books did well, and I was able to travel with the royalties I was earning at the time. And it wasn't until the 10th book that the concept of internal resistance actually came up. And my concentration book, which is my 10th book, I talk about the concept of the wanting mechanism and how all our wants can pull us in different directions that make it difficult to focus. And at the time, I didn't realize that chapter was going to become the seed that would germinate into the concept of internal resistance that I've been talking about and teaching for the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years.
So, one question is, you recognize the resistance, but how did you break through the brick wall?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, resistance there isn't any cookie cutter solution because each of our resistances are different. And some people have multiple layers of resistance. And that's what ended up happening for me. I would hit up one layer, I would work through it, and I thought that was it. But then I had another layer underneath and another layer underneath, which is why I was able to go so deep into this topic and understand it at a deep level because I was uncovering a lot of different layers. And um, it really helps to understand all the criteria the brain uses to hold us back. And it's not something that we can overcome in, I can talk about in just one session. But if anybody does want to do this work, it's actually pretty powerful where I can take them into their unconscious and we hit up on their exact issues. Because I could talk about some of the criterias and it may not apply to you. And if it doesn't apply to you, it would kind of be a waste of time. Though there is one simple technique that can help people not only uncover some of the resistance, but also push past it. And it's something I offer to people to do it as work on themselves. And it's self talk. And self talk, if anybody knows, it's creating statements of the change that you want to have or have happen, and then repeating it regularly. I'll give a couple examples. If a person wants to improve their memory, one, they can go out and buy books on memory, learn techniques, um, put all this effort in trying to learn and remember it, and then to apply it. Or they could just repeat the outcome they're seeking from learning memory, which is I have an excellent memory. I easily remember names, dates, facts, presentations, and more. Now, it may seem like those words can't do all that much, but just repeating those words can actually help improve your memory in ways beyond putting in all the effort in reading books and learning techniques and then applying them. The same thing if a person wants to become healthy or fit. They could go out and get a gym membership and work on diet and all that, or they could start with something as simple as I am healthy and fit. I exercise regularly. I always watch what I eat, and things of that nature. And again, when you start with the self-talk, it actually goes into the mind and programs our unconscious and can actually break free some of the resistance that's holding us back. So if a person wants a simple way, especially when it comes to their job, I know Milan, you talked about wanting to overcome your resistance. You would just write some statements of the exact precise outcome you're seeking and then repeat it. Now, this will not only help a person move forward, but it'll also give them a lot of data and insight into what their resistance is. For example, if a person wants to improve their memory and they're saying, I'm an excellent memory, I have an excellent memory, and their brain is going, no, you don't. You have a terrible memory. And it'll trigger moments in their life where they didn't remember things well. And it might even trigger memories of their past when somebody said something bad about their memory, like a teacher. All those are signs of your resistance. So when you repeat a positive statement and your mind retorts, those are all indications of why it believes you can't have it, won't have it, and shouldn't have it. So with this one simple technique, we can not only get access to a lot of causes of our resistance, but at the same time help us move forward. Now, there's many ways to push past resistance, but it's really good to start with the simple things because when it comes to resistance, we need to take an approach that's different from all other approaches. Um, it really focuses on the little things that lead to big outcomes, little actions that you can take that lead to big shifts. And I personally believe this is one of the easiest. And Marina asked about fear, and this is a really important question. So, a lot of times when I tell people I teach resistance, they ask me, is it because of fear or why does resistance come up? Well, it's not because of fear. Resistance uses fear to keep us from doing things. So when we have fear, it's because resistance has decided it doesn't want us to move forward. And it will use fear to keep us from moving forward. And that's an overt trick of resistance. It's the fear. But then there are some deceptive and tricky tricks of resistance, which isn't necessarily fear, but there are other forms of avoidance that seem like we're making progress when we're really not. And I kind of gave some examples. The perfectionism is one. Over planning can be another one, where a person puts all their effort in planning what to do and how to do it, and what not to do and how not to do it. And all that time we spend on planning is time we're not spending on doing the thing. And as long as we're not doing the thing, we're not making progress. So I hope that helps.
You mentioned that you have a technique where you help people tap into their subconscious. Uh, it sounds like hypnosis. Is it related?
So the way the brain works, anytime we hear something new, it connects to something we know or are familiar with. So when I say I help people go into their unconscious, they immediately connect to things they may have heard, like NLP and hypnosis. It's neither of those things. It's a method that I developed. So as you saw, I've done work for the last 20 years. And one of the challenges I had is everyone was telling me what my issue was and how to get over it. And I would listen to them, and it either didn't work or the progress wasn't what I was promised. And so I decided if our issues are in our brain, why don't we just go there for the answers? And that's what I did with this technique. I found a way to break the barrier between our conscious and unconscious mind that allows us to go into our unconscious and we can see our resistance much more clearly. And what's interesting is the way the brain works, all of our thoughts and ideas aren't floating aimlessly in our heads, they're all connected to each other. Meaning, anytime we have a thought or memory, it triggers other thoughts, memories, and emotions, and those will trigger even more. And because everything is connected, there's actually multiple layers to our resistance. It's not usually one thing. When I take people into their unconscious, we find that it could be 3, 4, 7, 8 things. And if they were just looking for one answer, they might work on that issue and then still not get results. But with this, we can kind of really hit up all the things that are going on. But what's really cool about this technique is that not only do we get to see what the resistance is, but we release it as well. So it's much more direct and more quick than other stuff because we're doing it at the unconscious level. Now, I know I didn't give a lot, but it's kind of one has to experience it to really understand what I mean. It's actually quite epic and profound, like how deep I can take a person and how deep we can work through their resistance, especially as quickly as it happens.
I have a question, if I may. So, Cam, it looks like your first book was about remembering what you read. Is that accurate?
My first book was actually, interestingly enough, it was called Mind Tools. It was about kind of connecting to your higher self. And I told you it took me 2 years to write it.
Yeah.
And then after I wrote it, I was so embarrassed by it, I never told anybody. And my resistance really kept me from pushing forward and actually marketing it. And so what I ended up doing is I took a couple chapters from that book and I turned them into their own mini books. And at the time when self-publishing was first coming into fruition, I posted them on Amazon and I got some good feedback. So my first book was really on self-talk. And I think self-talk is so powerful. I have a chapter dedicated to it on most of my books. And it's really the core of the message I help people understand. If they want to make as fast and easy of a shift as possible, like it really helps to start with self-talk. Because again, you can go out and learn, you can get the coaching, you can go to the seminars, and you get all this information. And then you have to apply the information, and then you have to do it wrong until you get it right. And then even when you master the information, if you're not being consistent with it, you start to lose it. So all that time you put in to learn, apply, and to internalize, you can start losing if you're not being consistent. So there's a lot of challenges that's posed by doing things at the unconscious level. But if we can go in and reprogram our unconscious to push us to do the things that we want, and at the high level that we're seeking, it makes taking action much easier. And with self talk, we can do that. Now, I will add one more thing. When we look at psychology and therapy, it's focused on the past. It's about going to our blocks in our past where we may have had challenging events and removing those things. And then personal development focuses on the future. It's about where you are and figuring out where you want to go and finding a direct line of path to that thing. I personally believe we need to do both because if we don't release the resistance from the past, it'll make it difficult to move forward. And if we don't have a direction of where we're wanting to go and programming our mind to go there, then it doesn't matter how much of the past we release, we'll just kind of stay stagnant. And so to summarize, it's really important to both unwire the old and rewire the new to make the progress that we're seeking.
Did you ever read a book called or by Shad Helmstetter called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself?
So I do a lot of podcasts. I do about 4 to 6 podcasts a week now. And I often get, and I speak, and I often get asked, have you read this book or have you done that? And almost always it's no, because I found a lot of the stuff that was out there sounded good in theory, but it didn't work in practice, which is why I went on the journey that I did to really get at the core of what was going on in the human experience. But I can honestly say I have read that book, and it was an influential book for me. I would say it influenced my thinking of self-talk. And here's why. Because self-talk isn't new. It's been talked about as far back as a man thinketh, as well as Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And back then they talked about it using words like autosuggestion. But there wasn't as good of a framework of how to use self-talk until Chad Helmstetter's book, What to Say When You, whatever the title is, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. It gave a much better framework. And I really like that book.
Okay. Was it your journey that kind of led you to self-talk and realizing you had an epiphany one day, hey, I'm actually saying this to myself, and this is my limitation and my resistance is me. Something inside of me is causing me to be resistant.
Yeah, so it's really interesting how I even got into personal development. After graduating from college, I got laid off of my first job. It was during the tech bubble. And it took me literally 15 interviews to get my second job. So I was pretty nervous about starting my second job. I was hoping everything went really well. And I remember I was at Barnes and Nobles and I was at the tape section. So this was back where there's tapes. And there were some tapes on overcoming fear and anxiety and some other related things. And I'm like, I need that. And they ended up actually being self-talk and visualization scripts. And they were really helpful. Like I would go to bed with them every night. And I remember, although I didn't feel any changes, I was just acting differently. I was acting more in ways that was moving me in the direction that I wanted. And that's really the cool thing about self-talk and the one-on-one work with me is it doesn't, you don't change differently, but you're acting, behaving, and even thinking differently. And I remember like, wow, that was kind of cool. And every time I would stop listening to the tapes, I could see how I would start to revert to my old ways. And then I started coming across certain personal development books. Um, One of them was The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And I came across other affirmation books prior to Chad Helmstedter's, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is actually a thing. And then when I started getting into other books, like the older ones, like Think and Grow Rich, I realized just how far it goes back. In fact, in between, I read a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, and she talked about affirmations as well. And I thought maybe she's the one who kind of invented it, but really it kind of goes back to the foundation of personal development. That's how powerful it is. And again, I felt back then a lot of it wasn't describing it how you could really repeat it. It was just saying do positive stuff or think about it in big picture of what you want, but not necessarily on the little things that you could even do to help you achieve your goal. What I mean by that is you can use self-talk very specifically to hone in on very specific aspects of the challenges you're experiencing and the outcome you're seeking. For example, I was never a really good communicator. I had a lot of challenges speaking, and I would stutter and stammer, and the thoughts I had in my head would rarely come out through the words of my mouth. And I could have gone the route of learning how to speak and all of that, but I just started by creating self talk statements. And I'll share the ones that I repeat even to this day. I say, I am an excellent communicator. I easily communicate my thoughts, ideas, feelings, experiences, and more. I can write about and verbalize anything. I'm never at a loss for words because the right words come to me quickly and easily. And those words were very specific to the challenges I was experiencing. Because, like I said, one of the statements is, I'm never at a loss for words. Words come to me quickly and easily. And I put that in there because I used to have a hard time coming up with the words that I wanted to use. So I honed in on the challenges I had and described it in a way with the outcome that I was seeking. And I repeat it every day. And I feel like I've become fairly good in communicating, whether it's in the written word or in the verbal word.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. I know in my journey over the last 3 years, that's definitely something I've noticed is what I'm saying to myself can significantly help or hinder
Yeah,
progress, right? And the Bible refers to this just, Proverbs talks about as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So it goes back a long way. And I would
it
say
does.
probably to the Garden of Eden when man was first created, but it's something we all struggle with and we all got to get a handle on, I think, for sure. So I appreciate your
Yeah.
sharing today.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I will add to that, it does go back, but no matter how much I tell people self talk, they can't imagine it could be all that helpful. So they pass it off. Or the other challenge I experience when I'm having people repeat self talk is they think it's the same as positive thinking. And positive thinking and self talk on the surface seem like they're the same things, but they're very different. Positive thinking is looking on the bright side or seeing the glass half full. But self talk is the actual movement of your mouth and the saying of the words. Two very different things. And you don't have to actually move your mouth. You could say them, repeat it in your head, but it actually has to be in the motion of you repeating the statement, not just looking at the statements in the mirror or listening to them on tapes, but actually saying them. And I use the word self-talk intentionally. I could easily say affirmations, but I don't, because people do confuse it with positive thinking.
How long did you have to, um, like, let's talk about just the communication piece, for example. How long did you have to self-talk before you actually saw some results in your behavior?
For the for so a lot of times people do ask me that, like how long can the results take. Sometimes it's instantaneous. Sometimes you'll start repeating a statement and you'll be just surprised at how you're actually acting out that statement or the things that you're wanting are showing up in your life. For other things that are more of a challenge, it takes a little bit longer. And I would say it took me about a good 3 to 4 months of consistently saying it every day, where it internalized, where now I can just kind of show up on a podcast, do a presentation, do a Q&A, and respond to questions in an intelligent and coherent way, where the person understands what I'm communicating without too many uhs and ums and you knows and things like that.